stairs here. All right. You fired up there, buddy?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So first of all, the Scrum Guide. The new Scrum Guide has probably reinvigorated more consulting people than anything else in the last several years. Just like tons of people are coming out of the woodwork talking about the Scrum Guide. And I got to say, so it's came out on November 18th. Nearly 2 years in the making. And actually, Ken Schwaber said he was ready to go with this right before the pandemic hit. And he said, I don't want to introduce this much change into the world at this point. And at the time, I'm sure we're all thinking, bah, that must be crazy. No big deal. But, he was right. So he's waited until this point to really polish it up, put it out there. It's simplified. It's less pages than ever. So here's the thing about the guide. About 30 people, more than 30 people helped him with it, helped him and Jeff. He didn't just do it in an ivory tower, these two fellows. They talked to some real experts. There's something called the user voice. It has good input to the Scrum Guide. You can go to the user voice also and add to it. It's like scrumguide.uservoice.com. Not saying that your comments will be responded to or anything, but that's where he keeps information. So right now, according to a Forrester study, 90% of the teams that say they're using Agile use Scrum. So it's the big dog in the game. Scrum.org, which I'm a member of, trained over 500,000 people on Scrum. There's 100 books on Scrum with that type of a title out in bookstores right now. So it's not a small thing, as you're sure about. It forms the basis for the majority of Agile approaches. And the thing that's been happening over the last few years is people are starting to use Scrum for things outside of IT. I've noticed that too with my training. So we're trying to make this less IT specific and take a look at some of the things that have happened over the years where people misinterpret Scrum. So it's not like this is a radical change. It's more like this is a clarification. It's actually less pages. So if we look at it, the intent is to clarify the misunderstanding. So what I'm going to do is talk about some of these misunderstandings and some of the areas that have been simplified for it. Really, the whole Scrum Guide, there's only one major thing that's been added to it. Most of it has been tweaking. So with the Scrum Guide 2017, some things that are misunderstood. Who's accountable to what? What happens if the product owner presents a product backlog and the development team doesn't like it? Who can revolt? Can you revolt against the product owner? Who's responsible for the quality of the product? What about this sprint goal? How many people don't use a sprint goal? I've seen it a lot. And why do you need a sprint goal? Boy, it's news to me. I never heard of it before, right? How about a definition of done? One of the things I see a lot of companies is they either have a very, very vague definition of done, or they don't really refine it. Just it's done when it's in production. Well, let's talk about that. Here's another question for you. If you're on a development team, how do you know how the product owner is sequencing the product backlog? What makes it hang together? Do they just come and read off cards to you when you go to sprint planning? What about this? You go to the daily scrum. Are there not those 3 magic questions? What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? Is there anything that's going to stop you from doing it? Sure. Another thing that was in the Scrum Guide, retrospective items. Shouldn't there be one in the product or sprint backlog every time? Releasing. When do you release? How do you order the work? Who sees that? These are some of the things that we're trying to make more clear with Scrum Guide 2017. So I'm more interested in telling you the why behind some of these things than the actual details of here's the wording change. You can look that up on scrumguides.com, find that. So here's the thing, Scrum is still Scrum. It's just the guide is improved. The guide is improved to focus on the whole team and to focus on value. Everybody focuses on value of a product rather than how much are we going to get done, what's our velocity, when are we going to complete it. There's a bigger focus on why we're building a product. not so much the what we're building, but why we're building so we can satisfy that with our technical expertise. The Scrum Guide is less prescriptive, broader applicability, so people outside of the IT industry can start to use it. We've gone through, I'm one of the stewards on the product owner course for scrum.org. There's only 2 of us. And believe me, we went through that thing and scrubbed as much as we could from the IT specific wording. So can you still use the 2017 guide? Sure you can. The 2020 guide just provides a bit more clarity on some things, and we hope you're going to find it more useful. One of the things that was funny is that Ken Schwaber talked about the changes to this. He had little snippets that he showed to us. And the thing he said was what he's learned over the years is less words. Make things with less words. That's really bizarre. But he said if you put more words in there, people start to quibble. So don't do that so much. That's why it's so much thinner. So what's misunderstood with this? Development team, Scrum Master, product owner. Who can be on a dev team? Can the product owner be a dev team member? How about the Scrum Master? How about this? Scrum Master. Is that a job title? Product owner, job title? Or is it a role in Scrum? One of the things they've done is refocused on this. If you say a Scrum Master is a job role, then you got a senior Scrum Master, executive Scrum Master, things like that. It gets peculiar. And as one of the other trainers said to me, a lot of times he sees people with a title Scrum Master in their job title, and yet they're an unempowered Scrum Master to say the least. They're just a master facilitator. Same with a product owner. I've seen that too. So here's what they're doing. The old version would say development team. Now we just say the developers. We have one team, shared responsibility. If you're doing good Scrum now, this isn't much of a change. In the old days, people would say, mistakenly, the product owner accepts the work of the Scrum team. The Scrum Master sometimes acts as the facilitator and the manager of them. We've made some changes on that. So the dev team is no longer a dev team. It's just people that are developers. Here's what this means to us. It's no longer just a group of people with separations from it. It's one group focusing on delivering value of the product. How about this? Roles as a term. What does a role mean to you? It's something that I had with my turkey a couple weeks ago, I guess. Is it a job description? Can you have multiple roles at once? If it's a job description, it'd be tough to do that. Is a development team only developers? I've seen that question many times. Well, they've changed the term roles to accountabilities. It might seem like a small little change, but what we're trying to say is rather than a role, something that's like a job description, we're saying we have somebody who's accountable for particular things. So that then means that the Scrum Guide is letting you be a developer in that role and letting you be a Scrum Master or product owner. It's making it more that there's accountability within certain people. Roles have always been thought of as accountability when the Scrum Guide came out, but it just got messed up because of the overloading of the word roles. So I'll give you a second to read this. I'm going to try really hard not to put up a lot of things that you have to read while I'm talking. So here's the difference. Development team is now developers. These are roles. The Scrum team is self-managing, cross-functional. Scrum Master is accountable for the Scrum process. I'm working my way up. Developers are accountable for creating done increments, managing their own work, moving up. Product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of the product. So we've changed it even from responsible to accountable. Notice this, Scrum team, and it's self-managing and cross-functional. There's another thing that's misunderstood. A Scrum guide used to say we're self-organizing. We have a self-organizing development team. Now we have a self-managing Scrum team. So how much is too much? How much self-organization is too much? It's hard to say. How do you know when you're self-organizing? That's hard to say. Who decides that? It's hard to say. But now when we have self-managing, that means more applicability. That means a bigger picture. So it's like this. You're as a young kid, you probably bother your mother all the time. You're over at her house and you're in your house and all your friends are there and they're making a heck of a racket. And your mother says, you guys, you get out of the house. I want you to go back to that field and I want you to call the people over on First Avenue and start up a baseball game. I want you to start up a baseball game against those two people and use that church parking lot. Just get out of the house and do that. So she's telling you what to do. She's managing you. You're self-organizing. Who's going to play what piece on this baseball game? I don't know. Let's go get the people on First Street and see what they're going to say. Self-managing, on the other hand, your mother says, you guys get out of the house. You're driving me crazy. Go outside and play. And you all go outside and play and you say, you know what? Let's start a soccer game with the people from First Street. So you're kind of figuring out what you're going to do. That's more of a self-managing. You're figuring out what to do, when to do it, how to do it, who does it. So I'll give you a second here to read through this. This bottom line here, question any management overhead that gets in the way of the Scrum team delivering value. I didn't say that, so don't get mad at me for that. That was what Dave West, he's our CEO of Scrum.org. He put that together. He's right. You know, we want to be able to manage ourselves. That doesn't mean you don't need managers. Anybody who says that needs to step back and think about it more. Management still might be important for a lot of different aspects, but when it comes to the team getting work done, now we're trying to be more autonomous with a group. What about that Scrum Master? Shouldn't they be a servant leader? Well, servant leader, what does that mean? Somebody stands in the front, gives you food? Maybe. Servant leader has been overloaded by so many books, so many articles, so many things. Lots of ink has been spilled on that. How do you know when you're a servant leader when you're doing too much? We've made a change in the Scrum Guide to make it more clear. The Scrum Master is not a servant leader, but a leader who serves. Seems like a small change, but I'll let you read through this a second. So the Scrum Master becomes somebody who's leading the group, but they're helping the group. That servant leadership becomes less clear. It becomes more clear with this change, I would hope. Here's another thing that's misunderstood. Product backlog. How does a product backlog hold together? I don't know. That's where all the product backlog items are, right? Well, how are they organized? What makes sense with it? What about a sprint goal? How many people have gone through a sprint and they have a goal that's, I'm doing this and this and this and this and this. It's like not a sprint goal, it's a sprint collage. What about the definition of done? Where should that go? Why do you make a definition of done? There's a lot of unclarity about that. So what we've done is this. We still have the roles, the artifacts, and the events. Each one of these elements, The artifacts now have commitments tied to them. As an example, the product backlog has something new, a product goal. It's analogous to the sprint backlog having a sprint goal. The increment now has a commitment. It's called the definition of done. So the definition of done governs what the increment's going to be like. The sprint goal tells you the reasoning behind the sprint. The product goal tells you the reason behind the product backlog. So that makes some interesting ways to look at things. I've got a little bit more about the product goal because that's probably the biggest change. It rippled throughout the Scrum Guide and throughout the product owner class too. Here's a few things that they got rid of. In the daily Scrum, just so you know, they're looking at product or progress toward the sprint goal, any risks toward the sprint goal. They got rid of those 3 questions in the daily Scrum and said, let's look at our progress toward the sprint goal and make a plan for that. So that should eliminate a lot of meetings, they're saying, with a daily Scrum like that. So here's the commitments again. Commitments are mandatory, and every artifact has one. Sprint backlog and definition of done were already out there. Sprint goal was already out there too, but misapplied. But we're trying to help people understand the vision and focus on the why, not the details of, I'm going to do this piece of work or this piece of work or this piece of work. It supports inspection and adaptation for each one of these pieces. So let's get into this product goal a little bit. How does the team know right now, before this new Scrum goal or Scrum Guide came out, how do they know the direction of the product? Well, I suppose they have a vision. There's not a lot of guidance on making vision other than going to a product owner course. Where is it kept? I don't know. So what we've done, and this is kind of an eye chart, we've put together a product goal. Come on, there we go. Let me give you just a minute to look through this. But before you do, at the top I have a product that's an autonomous traffic light control. That's our product. We're making that. And why are we doing it? We're going to save lives by reducing traffic accidents. It's an aspiration. It's aspirational. That's our product vision. Our goal is something that's measurable. Autonomously change traffic light flow via traffic lights, depending on the volume. So we can tell when we've done that. The sprint goal, as we pick work for a sprint, we want some sort of a goal that tells us why we're doing that sprint. That's achievable within a particular sprint. So let me give you just a minute to read through this. Couple things about the product goal. There is only one product goal at a time. Notice that? The product goal governs the product backlog. That product goal can be completed or it can be abandoned. I suppose it could be modified. But that's why we're putting together the product backlog. Similar to the reason why we put together a sprint backlog. Some of the more advanced teams I've worked with, to give you an idea on the sprint goal, they'd collaborate on creating a sprint goal, and then they'd go to the product backlog and pick items that help meet that particular goal, rather than picking items and trying to craft a goal from that. Similar idea with a product goal. It's better if you can come up with, what's our product goal? What's something that's measurable that helps fulfill that vision? Then we create a product backlog that moves toward it. So it's going from aspirational, measurable, to achievable. The Scrum team must fulfill one product goal before taking on another or abandon it. So whole team accountability. But the product owner is accountable for developing it and explicitly communicating it. It drives the evolution of the product backlog. So I guess the question is, do you need to make one of these? Well, do you need to use Scrum Guide 2020? I guess not. But if you're going to start using 2020, this should help you quite a bit. Here's some questions you can ask yourself. Oops. Went the wrong direction, my mistake. Here's some questions you could think of when you're looking at a good product goal. So Scott, I'm going to pick on you here. If you'd be so kind as to read through those and find one that really resonates with you. I'll give you a minute or so. So Scott, is there one question in there that kind of resonates with you?
Yeah, I like, the first one I think is really interesting because to me that, I think that really could empower, the developers to question that as, if the product owner is going through and just saying, okay, I want this one and this one and this one and sprint planning, for example, and it really empowers the team to say, well, wait a minute, what that last one there, that doesn't, how is that related to the product, the product goal, and to wrestle with that, because out of that, it could be, a collaborative effort to, change that item or what have you.
What if you have a product goal with an "and" in it? What do you think of that one, Scott? I'll give you a hint. It's not good.
Right. Yeah. It could be. Yeah. Yeah. It just goes on and on and on. Right. And it would probably challenge the people to be focused. Right. Something short that they can. That also reminds me, just like if you could catch the team in the elevator, right? What's the product goal you guys are working on right now? Oh, it's this. It's something simple that they could just kind of dish out quickly. Be very focused.
It'd be very much like a sprint goal. It's saying, I'm doing this item, this PBI, and this PBI, and this PBI. Oh, great. I got a Waldorf salad as a product goal. Here's the other thing about the product goal. When you get done with a sprint, you inspect the product. That's the sprint review, of course. You adapt the product backlog accordingly, but you can inspect it in the context of the product goal. Are we moving toward that product goal? Should we adjust? So that gives a lot of clarity to it. And by the way, this is just part of the product owner course. I pulled that out because that product goal, it took a while for me to get a grip on it too. And at the end of the slide deck, I'll show you a link where you can go out and see some other people that have written up a lot of good stuff on it. Oops. Oh, I got one of those Apple mouses. Sometimes they don't do what I want them to do. Sprint planning. We're going to sprint planning. Woo-hoo. Sprint planning is where we do all our estimates, right? Sprint planning is where developers sit there and absorb what the product owner gives them, right? Well, not so much anymore. Sprint planning is broken down now into 3 pieces. It always used to be similar to this. But instead of going through and saying, what can we do this sprint? Well, we can do these pieces of work. Now, how are we going to do it? Now we're saying, why do we want to do this sprint? That why can be fulfilled by coming up with a succinct and good sprint goal. Then, what can we do during this sprint that's going to contribute to the why? Then, how are we going to do the work that's going to contribute toward the why? So while The intent in the Scrum Guide was always to have a sprint goal that tells you the reason behind the sprint. It's been de-emphasized, well, unintentionally de-emphasized, let's say that. Now it's front and center. Why is this sprint valuable? This can be a game changer for you. So the sprint reason is fulfilled by the sprint backlog, which just becomes a plan. And that plan to fulfill that reason may well not work out, but you still want to fulfill that reason. So that leaves malleability in the sprint backlog. So just another way of looking at this. The only thing that's changed on this is when the product backlog comes in to your sprint planning, we also have a product goal. And that product goal gives us the reason for our product, and our sprint should contribute to that product goal. Coming out, we now have a sprint backlog with selected product backlog items, a plan, and a sprint goal. The sprint goal becomes front and center. Okay. So what's misunderstood with the rules and the guidance? What is overly constraining in the Scrum Guide 2017? Do we have to ask 3 questions at the daily Scrum? What's complex? When do we estimate? Why do we estimate? Is our retrospective items part of the sprint backlog? When do we cancel sprint? Well, a lot of these things have been removed. Throughout the Scrum Guide, there's a lot of weird language, some complex language. So the Scrum Guide came out about 2002 or 3, somewhere in the early 2000s, the first one. And it was like 70 pages or more. It's getting skinnier. Can't wait for the next one to come out. It's just gonna be a 1 page, an A3, right? We've gotten rid of all the comments that say we estimate. Now we forecast. We're trying to keep people from being on a death march. We don't say now that you have to have a retrospective improvement as part of the sprint backlog. We expect you to continuously improve. It's servant leadership is now a leader who serves. The organization no longer creates the definition of done. It's the responsibility of the Scrum team. There were a lot of details on canceling a sprint within the prior sprint or Scrum Guide. This one took it out because we want to be more flexible to you. Refinement is no longer 10% of the team's capacity. That's taken out. It is what you need it to be. Here's another interesting thing. Scrum team, 10 members or less. It doesn't say 3 to 9, it just says 10 or less. I guess you could have 1 person on a team. That'd be a pretty lonesome team, but you could. The Scrum Guide no longer uses the word meeting. They're called events, or activities, things along those lines. And experimentation is explicitly mentioned. So let me press on just a little bit more here. Does this make sense to you? Let's find out. What do you think? True or false? There's more than one product goal for a product at any given time.
False.
Yes, thank you. The product goal may change as the product evolves. If not, we wouldn't be using much empiricism, would we? So it makes sense to do that. The product owner can also be the Scrum Master. Well, the Scrum Guide, the new Scrum Guide does not prohibit it. So it is true. It is true, but boy, most people don't recommend it. So it's permissible. Product owner and Scrum Master can be a developer. Permissible. not necessarily a good practice. Say again, Paul?
Pardon?
I would say no, false.
For which one?
Number 3, the product owner can also be a Scrum Master.
Actually, that is true that it can be. That is a true.
Oh.
Oops. But let me just annotate this. You know that? I can't. Oh well. So, there's more than one product goal, false. Product goal may change, true. Product owner can also be a Scrum Master, true. Not a good practice, but true. Product owner or Scrum Master can be a developer, true. Not a good practice, but can do it. All work in a sprint must contribute to a product goal. False. You can have a sprint without a sprint goal. False. Now you have to have a sprint goal. Sprint goal should contribute to the product goal. It's a true.
Agree.
Good. Come on. There we go. You want to do well in Scrum, you still got to be a professional and follow the basics. This is more focused on clarity on what that means. Okay. I just got a couple wrap-up slides in order to talk about these a bit more. Sorry about that, going backwards again. So here's what Ken and Jeff said in one of the blog articles they put out there. This is less prescriptive. It's less prescriptive because we want to be more inclusive to other groups, not just IT folks or not just folks we've talked to. One team focused on one product. If you want multiple teams focusing on a product, I was surprised to hear this, but Ken said that we have ways to do that, but the Scrum guide is the basis for one team, one product. They've introduced product goal. Now they have a home for the sprint goal, definition of done, product goal. Self-managed over self-organized to allow more team freedom. 3 topics in the sprint planning so that they have a reason behind it. And simplification of the language for a wider audience. So at the end of this slide deck, I did say, there's a great series on it from scrum.org. You go to scrum.org/scrum-guide-2020 and look at that. There's a good one there on the product goal. And I'll share these slides with you afterwards. And now that I've given my piece, I hope you made some notes and are ready to do a little bit of question and answer. And how do we go about that, Scott, for the question and answer on this? Kind of stop sharing. This is the part that scares me.
I mean, folks can just, holler out what their question is.
I have a question. I can holler out.
There you go. Holla.
So let's say I'm a Scrum Master and I'm implementing 2017 Scrum Guide and I want to implement the 2020 Scrum Guide. If I just go in and change everything all at once, I might cause some damage to my velocity. So what would you do? What would be your focus on what you would hit first? And how would you go about it?
Do you have a sprint goal?
Yes.
Okay.
I have sprint goals since they put them in Jira. I thought that was pretty good. So
Oh.
I didn't know I was doing something for 2020, but.
Well, it's not just for 2020, but if you don't have those, you ought to start doing that. Then you can start to take a look at your sprint planning session and say, why are we going to do this sprint? Well, here's a good goal for it. Let's try and pick the work from that. That's where I'd start.
Okay,
then
thanks.
Start moving toward a product goal.
Can I take a stab at that question too?
Yeah, absolutely.
My thinking on that would be, if you polled your team today, would they respond with saying, "Oh yeah, we're on the 2017 guide and we're adherent to that," or would it be somewhat transparent to them? And I'm going to make a supposition, a bit of a guess, that it's probably more of the latter. That yeah, they know we do Scrum, but could they tell you which guide version it is? I would doubt that. So
I doubt they even know we do Scrum, but
yes, well, that's a possibility too. So yeah, I think the approach I would take would be one based in empiricism. Hey, do we have a goal? Hey, I read about this. We should have a goal. What do you guys think about this? This will help us. Let's try it this next sprint. That's the way I've always introduced change into teams, and unless they're very highly well read and know that they're using the guide and they want to adhere to that, then I might be more willing to introduce that concept of, hey, the 2020 guide suggests A, B, and C. Let's go try it. Otherwise, I would just start empirically adding things.
Good point.
I find it interesting. If you use a link to Scrum Guide before, it's still pointing to the newest version. So I totally agree with Tony that if your team is so savvy that even if they're using the link to go to Scrum Guide for reference purposes, they're going to see the newest stuff. They're not going to get trapped into an archive version.
And that's a good point too, Tony. And by the way, if you want to see the older version, you go to scrumguides.org and you click on history. That's one way to look at it. Other questions out there?
Hey, Charles, this is Rob Dennison. Can you talk a little more about the product goal again? Because, or if you want to go back to that slide you had with the traffic light, because I was a little confused there. It looked like there could be the possibility of having more than one goal, product goal across the product vision is what I kind of gleaned from it. Is that not true?
One second here. Come on. Zoom, do what I'm telling you to. There we go. So you got a vision. It's a big aspiration. I can see that aspiration just, I don't know, like it never goes away, that vision, or rarely goes away. But your product supports that vision. Our goal for that product is to worry about autonomous traffic light control or coordination. Maybe a couple years down the road, we're really good at getting this autonomous traffic light flow working. So we start dealing with, I don't know, right turn indicators or something like that, or tracking accidents on roundabouts.
Okay.
So I can see that vision being really long-lived. The product goal, until you meet that product, until you finish pretty much with that product. And you're ready. I could cite
sorry, Charles.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I could cite a real example of that's been very, very much front and center and evolutionary. A product vision is I want to aggregate all of our enterprise data. And so an initial product goal was we're going to provide self-service platform capabilities so that people will want to come and bring their data into our environment. A current iteration of the product goal is we want to use privacy law changes as a forcing function to bring people onto the platform because they have to be compliant with all the new regulation. That's a very real thing. That's a very real product goal that I could articulate almost verbatim for my work today.
One thing I do want to be careful of is that you don't think of a product goal being necessarily a release goal of some sort.
Absolutely.
We released it. That's our product goal. No. It might be multiple releases too.
So again, you think you have one product goal for the product vision, and the product goal is measurable, whereas the vision is still an aspiration.
Yes.
Okay, so the product goal then is what am I accomplishing to meet my vision? And that could be a long-term product goal. It continuously goes on and on as I continue to measure whether I'm meeting my vision or not.
And I do want to point out, I don't believe the term vision is used throughout the Scrum Guide 2020. But a lot of times when product owners are making up an idea, they come up with a product vision.
Okay, that helps.
The whole intent was to say, we got a sprint backlog. We've got a sprint goal to say why we're doing it. Now we got a product backlog. Why don't we have something? Well, I'm sure it wasn't so glib, but we should have something that says why we're doing the product. Boom, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
Is that good, Robert?
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Hey, Chuck, Ruth posted a question in the chat. She's asking, has the assumption always been one team, one product, or is this new? That may explain my disconnect with some of these changes.
You know, I'm having a hard time answering that because there is scaling options where we look at one product with multiple teams. And that's the Scrum.org Nexus part. So that is an exoskeleton laying on top of Scrum. Whether it's 2020 or 2017, that still exists. So I don't think it's a change. I just don't think it was articulated that I've seen it. See, if you have one team and one product, that's Scrum. If you have 2 teams and one product, 3 teams and one product, 4 teams and one product, now you're talking like a Scrum.org Nexus or a less approach or a Scrum at scale approach. If you're talking about multiple teams, multiple products trying to coordinate, that's like project management, portfolio management. That's some of the things that SAFe tries to handle. If you have one team and multiple products, that kind of idea, now you got task switching and potential confusion, to say the least. So this is focused in that lower corner where it says 1 and 1. You want to grow it to multiple with 1, get some frameworks to help you. Did that clarify for you?
Yeah. Hey, me again. Maybe make it something relevant and tangible and practical from my own experience. That example I cited earlier of that data platforms, we're using Scaled Agile. And so our product is data platform, but we have multiple component teams that contribute to that platform. We have a data ingestion team, we have a data lake team, we've got what we call our query fabric, and they're all building different pieces of that larger product ecosystem. But in any case, it's a one-to-one in the sense of they're contributing toward one product. They're not spanning multiple products. It's one product they're building toward.
Yeah, I can see that too. People are using SAFe well. They're doing that. A lot of people don't use it very well, unfortunately.
That's true. It's very true.
One of the things I've noticed with it is it can tend to make people think in a project management mentality rather than a product evolution mentality. So you're worried about time, scope, and budget. Product evolution, you're worried about the nougaty goodness that comes out of your product for the customer.
Yeah. Without diverting or going too far down the rabbit hole, what I would say to that, because I agree with you, and the fact I've seen that in past experience, where I think we've been successful with it in the current environment where I am is we've paired that with a hyper focus on really disciplined product management. And our focus is on optimizing the value, not on managing, the triple constraint. And I found it actually has been helpful in pushing that product management mentality further into the organization, where in the past, some of the engineers I worked with would have a very task-oriented linear view about their work. Now they have a more holistic view about how is it contributing to the health of the product. So I am cautious, but if you pair those principles, what's safe, and I would say this is probably true for any scaling approach, pair it with strong product management fundamentals, and I think it creates some success. That's, at least in my case, that's what I found to be true.
Well, I got to say thanks, Tony. I think there's hope for humanity now after hearing
that. Agreed.
Okay. Other questions here? We got just a couple more minutes. I got the Scrum Guide sitting there and all the changes too. There's the big list out there.
I have one question about having a single product goal at a time. And I don't know if this is just my own interpretation, which might be incorrect, but it almost appears to me when I'm looking at the product goal, it almost sounds like a feature where, let's say, and what happens for me is that we may switch back and forth between one feature and another so that you make progress. You might, let's say, for instance, have some product backlog items that we work down in a particular sprint, another sprint takes place, and in a sense that features can span sprints in that way. And it almost feels like a feature is a goal, but the only thing is we may not be working on only one feature at a time. We might be switching back and forth. So that's where I get a little bit hung up on this idea of saying that I only have one goal, because I'm used to thinking that, well, we might be pursuing more than one feature across sprints, and features almost feel like a goal.
Oh, man, goals. You're going to make my head explode there, Gene. We've got goals. We've got epics. We've got initiatives. What are they? It depends on who you're talking to about those things. To me, when you start talking about a feature, that's like climate control on your car. And our vision might be to have the most comfortable experience that we can have when moving from one location to another automatically. That's our car. That's our vision for the car. So the goal, boy, I'm not going to say a goal because I'm going to goof it up. But to me, a feature is something just a little bit smaller. It's a behavior of the system. Okay. Whereas the goal is the reason for being for the product at this point.
Okay.
Did that clarify it a little bit?
A little bit better. Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
Yeah, I got a long, gnarly conversation about features and epics and stories. Okay. That I got out of Seb Rose and his behavior-driven development stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the earlier statement. It's product management maturity. A goal, it should be measurable, but it's likely nothing on a scale smaller than about a year, and maybe longer than that. But, to me, a goal should be, something we can tangibly measure, but it's not something we're going to achieve in a single sprint or a single quarter. It's probably, this year, this is a goal we have. And it's like the example of the streetlights. We want to build this autonomous reaction, and a year from now that it may be the same goal, or it may shift based on, what we learn from how we develop that autonomy or changing conditions in the world. A year ago, nobody was expecting a pandemic, which for at least a time cut down on the number of traffic, the amount of traffic on the road. And that might change how you think about, what's our goal relative to the vision we have about improving safety. So I look at it in those terms, and I guess the initial thought that occurred to me, and it's a little bit blunt, but to me, it's having a goal that could be delivered in a single sprint is almost a lack of imagination, to be very blunt about it. But I think you have to think in those broad strokes. That what you're working on in each sprint, your sprint goal, should support that larger product goal, and that product goal should be sustained over a period of time.
And yeah, and keep in mind too, it's a Scrum guide, operative word being guide, not a dictation. That's the guardrails within which you operate. Don't go outside the guardrails, but you got a lot of flexibility in there. So,
to belabor the point, can we go back to your example about the car? So the vision is this great traveling experience is the vision, right? Mm-hmm. And then we jump over the product goal to the feature, and I called it a micro goal just for fun. So this feature is climate control inside the car. That's one part of this great traveling experience, right? So help me put the product goal in between those two, right? You got your vision of great traveling experience, and you've got the or comfortable traveling experience, like what you were saying, and you got the feature, climate control in the car, great. Now, what's this product goal in between? It's this measurable way of saying I'm meeting my great, comfortable.
I should have thought of this more before you asked that question. I'm thinking like it's a Cadillac SXR, or one of those fancy cars that rides like an easy chair. So something similar to that. That's what our product is going to be like. So a feature might be climate control. Sprint. That feature is something that is the behavior of the system. So I guess some sort of climate control. It's not necessarily a product at all. It's one. The product is the car itself. So,
product goal could be something like we want to build an automation control center to anticipate comfort levels of the rider, and I think that would align to that vision of comfort and the feature of climate control. A goal might be we're gonna build automation to be anticipatory to how the driver and passengers are going to respond, and that could be a goal for the here and now. And that goal might shift, later to something else about, we want to break away from autonomy because we found the passengers, they want to have more control. So we need to give them a more responsive mechanism for controlling their climate. The goal could shift over time based on market conditions and user feedback.
One of the things I do want to say about it, the difference between the feature and the product goal, I can see a car having a whole bunch of different features on it. But what's your product? Is it climate control, or is it the car? I would say it's the car. So the product itself has a goal, and the features might be like this big honking thing that you spread out into different user stories, epics, PBIs of some sort.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so maybe the definition of product is a suspect. Yeah, one of the things they do say, and some of the stuff I read about this is it's very context driven too. So I probably should have thought of a better example than that, but it is what it is. I encourage you to go out, and by the way, we will give these slides out to you here shortly. I would encourage you to go out to the different blogs out on scrum.org and look at some of those. Ken Schrader, if you didn't know that, runs scrum.org. He's actively involved. We get to talk to him as a trainer every so often. It's a joy. So his intent is more directly communicated to us.
Can I ask a question that's not about the guide or changes in the framework itself, but I guess just more industry or maybe even bounding on philosophical in nature. Is there alignment or consensus between what Ken has produced and through scrum.org and the other bodies that are professing ownership or leadership in the field? I'm thinking specifically of like Scrum Alliance, some of the other bodies that provide certification and education. Is there agreement about these changes make sense and we concur, or is there divergence among, what the definitions are?
So I love my Scrum Alliance people. They know Scrum, and they've been involved too. So these people are in agreement. People like the SAFE folks, I don't really know. I haven't followed them too carefully. Scrum Study, I'm sure they haven't. They've got their own 300-page guide. But generally in the industry, this is the accepted one. It's not just Ken Schwaber, it's Jeff Sutherland. We've had people from different pieces of the industry involved with this too. The other one I'm not 100% sure is the PMI. They've got their Agile extension, ACP, Agile Certified Practitioner. I took that a while ago, and I don't know if they're following this quite honestly or not. So that's about the best I can do.
Okay. I mean, I think just with respect to Scrum itself, it's you know, I think the two I think of are Scrum.org and Scrum Alliance, and I think everybody else kind of follows suit or would even suggest, you know, we provide, like, I like the analogy you had earlier about the scaffolding. You know, we defer to the Scrum Guide for the mechanics of single teams. It's the interrelationships that the scaffoldings are trying to address.
One of the big differences I would say between Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org is that Scrum.org has one set of material that all the trainers use, and it's taken care of by a steward model. So two people curate the material, whereas the Scrum Alliance, some of that material is by trainers, so it can be more divergent on it. It's not that it's bad. It's not that they don't know Scrum or anything, that's for sure. But we're striving for more consistency when we go from continent to continent to different languages too. And we also make sure that the Scrum test is not part of the class. And it's hard, so it should be. You know, you could say I climbed a 5,000 foot peak as opposed to a 14er. There's a big difference. So we try and make that stuff a significant achievement. Good, Jenny? Ready to press on, you guys?
Yep. Okay, Scott, did you have anything else?